Happy Tuesday.
Tuesday.
We are here today to jump into the topic of personas, but more specifically, personas for the purpose of creating new products and services. Okay, so what we have seen as we think through all of the different projects that we've worked on, that when you are standing up something new and you are potentially bringing a new experience or service to customers, you need to have an understanding of those customers from a profile perspective or an archetype perspective. And so when we think about personas, what we saw was a common theme around the fact that personas are really, really useful, whether you're in a company or a product space or in a nonprofit, or any type of organization that is looking at creating something that's got to scale, that's got to introduce capability and services to people. And so when you think about this, let's jump into the conversation before I start to ask questions.
Yeah, so I know we've all heard, and I know we had this conversation just the other day. In fact, I was working with a client where their UXer got a lot of pushback when they even said the word personas. So engineering was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Those are things we just file away. We know who our user is. So I think to start things out is to say, yes, I have seen those situations where you just have personas that really, by the way, may not be based on any data, and certainly haven't been validated. But also they do just get filed away, and it talks about this person likes this color and, all those fun things we've all seen in personas. But there's a huge value in them. Well, first of all, just to make sure, do you even know who your audience is? Or have you just picked one persona so you've eliminated potentially 50% of your other prospective user population? So I think they're really valuable, and you've got to keep in mind when you're creating these and gathering that data or validating, you're usually going to have multiple personas as you go through that. So people think very differently. If you are targeting a diverse audience, then your personas need to be diverse as well, and really talk about what those people, what are their thoughts, what is their background, what are the tools they use, what are, as we discussed recently, what are their perspectives of the world. So, the way you may have to message things is different.
That's
so
right.
Now I'm the one blabbering on. But.
So let's first talk about what you stand to lose if you don't create personas first. Yeah. So some of the things that you stand to lose are capturing those diverse perspectives, just like you said.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to start out with that one size fits all approach.
Yes.
For solution. And we've got to consider accessibility and inclusivity in that. Yep. And so coming up with that one archetype is very, very problematic. You've got to understand who are your early adopters, your evangelists, and those that might not be a part of your user base that you need to know exist, so that when you see them, you know to run away from them. That's all about that market fit. And so you want to make sure that you're creating something that's not too narrow of a view of your market. You also want to make sure that your entire team is aligned on who you're building for, who you're solving for, what problems are you focused on, like you just described, some of those aspects of that persona. And finally, that scalable foundation. So you stand to lose having something that can scale if you don't understand the differences and nuances of each of your user types.
Right. Yes. And I like you mentioned that, because you can start out with, targeting one persona, especially when you're talking about a new product or service. We all, like to go lean where we can, get something out there. And maybe it is that, for instance, early adopter. So yeah, that as long as you've stacked hands and said, hey, for right now, that's what we're going to focus on. We know there are this other market out there, and we'll build into that. And as long as, you understand what that market is, and you don't hurt yourself from being able to scale and reach that group of people.
And to add to that, I've also been pleasantly surprised at the quality and forethought that teams like I've worked with local government organizations
Yeah.
and nonprofits that have done a really, really good job of identifying their different personas and the differences between them. I remember years ago working on a project where we identified a white space in the market.
Yeah.
And the first step was to understand, even before you know what you're solving for, it was just a matter of understanding that that white space did not have a solution around the capabilities that our organization served.
Mm-hmm.
And so the very first thing we did was capture their workflows, but define those personas. And the personas came out to be 3 core user types, which really focused on, and this is, for our audience, when you think about those personas, you want to think about what is that one or few characteristics that differentiate those personas. And in our case, it was their willingness to adopt technology and innovation. And so we had those 3 personas. And our 4th persona was our non-target, the laggard, the person that we would never want to serve. And so we had a good profile of that type of customer or user that helped us to recognize, like I said earlier, when you need to just move on and stop trying to educate and influence, capture that particular persona.
Yeah. And it's interesting the different ways. I think another big question, and maybe you're about to get into that, is like, how do you do that? How do you start when you have a white space like that? How do you even begin to, in this world of this huge population, how do you start honing things down to where you have 1 persona, 2 personas, 3 personas? So one thing to keep in mind, I'm not sure, Kenya, I may be jumping ahead of where your mind's going, but is that it's fictional, right? But it's based on something. So yeah, it shouldn't be such that it reflects some individual in the sea. It should reflect a group, whatever that group may be that you hypothesize or you have data indicating, hey, this is going to be our sweet spot. This is a prospect. And you go out, right? You use all the methods we use to do research today, ethnography, get on the ground, get in offices, watch what people are doing, do IDIs, do surveys, and then start synthesizing and understanding and trends around whatever, persona it may be. So, it can feel like a heavy lift, especially when you're in a new space, but really it's relying on a lot of these methods we use for a variety of purposes. You've got marketing out there too, collecting data.
That's also why it's so important, because that information then becomes helpful not only to you creating, but also marketing and selling, evangelizing, and all of those motions that have to take place in order for people to learn about this new solution. And to your point around how do you start the process, if you were to go and interact with 15 people who are within that potential user space, you might find that you have 2 to 3 to 4 personas that come out of those interviews or interactions with those 15 people, but a persona never represents just one of them.
Yes.
It is an archetype that represents what you see in terms of common themes across 4 or more, 5 or more individuals. And you want to be able to with some level of confidence say, okay, this is where we can make a distinction between persona A and persona B.
Right, where it matters. Yeah. So once it gets to where, hey, I can't generalize this for certain populations, and that probably means it's another persona. And yeah, and those can grow with you and your product, right? We're always learning when we do usability tests. That's iterative. Anything's iterative, right? So as you get something out in the market or as you learn more, you may find you need to tweak that. It's not like carved in stone, once you have that persona, but it provides everyone with a shared understanding of who they're trying to market to, who they're trying to help, and those pain points. They're very good for that. They can change.
They can absolutely change. And when you think about your personas and why we wanted to focus on this conversation today around creating personas or doing the work to identify your personas prior to creating something new, is because a lot of our projects lately have been about spinning up a new offering, a new service, and improving something by incorporating technology into that service. And when you think about the importance of personas, that allows you to make the distinction between the different user types. But as you think about your roadmap of what that solution should look like, what is going to fulfill the needs of all of your personas versus those capabilities that are going to fulfill the needs of the individual personas. And again, this goes back to that foundational solution, whether it's a product or service, and how can you make it something that can scale? That's
yes. How do you? Yeah, exactly.
And there's not a whole lot, right?
Not a lot to add.
So again, just to recap, you want to make sure you're capturing the diverse perspectives. Avoid the one-size-fits-all approach to creating a solution, especially if it's a new creation. You want to ensure that you are looking at your market fit. So market fit might involve looking across all personas or focusing on the one or two that are more progressive in their adoption or thinking. You want to also ensure these personas support your internal team alignment and a scalable product or service offering. So when you think about focusing on creating something new, focus on understanding and building out those artifacts that are personas that you can use to frame the creation and the conversation.
Yes, and constantly validate those personas.
Absolutely right. Well, thank you so much for listening today. If you have any questions whatsoever or you want to reach out to us, we're always here to answer your questions, but to also take into consideration any new topics you'd like us to discuss. So send them over. Have a wonderful